She didn't ask for help. Didn't even lift her head when the rain began falling harder. Sheets of cold water, cascading from the heavens, like grief unspoken. She just stood there, as if rooted to the roadside. If you believe in second chance, redemption, so subscribe, because this story will surprise you with love, joy, redemption, and second chance. Come on, let's get back on story. A solitary figure soaked to the bone, clutching more than just a duffel bag. Her shoulders bore a burden invisible to the eye, the kind forged in silence, stitched together with loss. Ben Callahan was on his way home, hand steady on the wheel of his old Ford pickup, when he saw her. Just a glimpse at first, a blurred outline in the storm. He was a single father. She was a soldier with nowhere left to go. Two strangers with no map to what lay ahead, but fate, quiet and persistent, had other plans. Sometimes the smallest acts of kindness become the turning point in a story neither person forgets. Sometimes it all begins with one knock, a moment so gentle it almost goes unnoticed, until everything changes. If you believe in second chances, in the kind of love that heals more than wounds and more than hearts, then listen close. Let me take you back to the night it all began. The rain started soft, barely a whisper against the windshield, like hesitant fingers drumming a lullaby on glass. But it didn't stay that way. Within minutes, it turned ruthless, a relentless Oregon downpour slashing through the trees and hammering the road. It felt like nature was shouting, like something wild and wounded needed to be heard. Ben leaned forward, squinting through the storm as the wipers raced across the glass. His hands, roughened from years of carpentry, clutched the wheel. His life, ever since his wife passed, had felt like this storm, cold, endless, unpredictable. He turned briefly to his son sitting beside him. "You okay, bud?" Wyatt, all 9 years of him, gave a small nod, his pale hair damp from earlier and sticking to his temple. He didn't look up from his book, just wondering if we'll make it home before dinner gets cold. Ben smiled, tired, crooked thing. "If the rain doesn't sweep us off the road, we'll be all right." They were almost back to Maple Hollow, a sleepy timber town tucked deep in pine-covered hills, a place where the streets remembered your name even if you tried to forget it. It had more dogs than stoplights, more silence than sound. Every street corner still smelled like her, his late wife. Every meal still echoed her laughter. Every night stretched too long, filled with ghosts and empty space. But tonight wasn't about grief. It was just about getting home. Until he saw her. At first, she was just a shadow by the road, maybe a broken signpost. But then lightning cracked the sky wide open, and she came into full view, a woman standing utterly still, rain cascading down her like judgment. She wore fatigues, her military duffel at her feet, one hand raised against the storm, the other clinging to a phone like it was a lifeline to the world she no longer belonged to. Ben didn't think. His foot slammed the brake. The truck fishtailed slightly before grinding to a halt just ahead of her. "Dad," Wyatt murmured wide-eyed. "She's a soldier." Ben didn't answer. He was already out the door. The rain hit him like a wave as he jogged toward her, boots splashing through puddles. Up close, she looked like she hadn't slept in days. Her face was pale, her jaw tight with resolve. Her whole frame sagged, not from the weight of her duffel, but from whatever she carried inside. "You okay?" Ben called over the storm. She looked up, startled. Her eyes were sharp, the kind that had seen too much, but they were tired. So very tired. "I'm fine," she replied, the words brittle as glass. "You don't look fine." "I've got roadside assistance," she said quickly, lifting her phone. "Just waiting." Ben nodded, but he saw the tremble in her hand, the way her thumb hovered, unsure. "No signal out here," he said gently. She hesitated, then muttered, "Figures." "Come on," Ben offered. "My kid's in the truck. We're 5 minutes from town. You can warm up, dry off, just until someone gets here." Her shoulders stiffened. Pride battled exhaustion in her eyes. "I'm not a charity case," she said. "I'm not offering charity," Ben replied calmly. "Just kindness. There's a difference." For a heartbeat, she stood frozen. Then, with a sigh, she bent to grab her bag. "Okay," she whispered. Just for a bit. Back in the truck, Wyatt scooted over without a word. He looked at her curiously, not afraid, just observant, the way children are when they sense someone has walked through fire. "Tessa," she said quietly. "Tessa Rohr. Ben Callahan. And that's Wyatt." The boy gave her a polite nod, the kind his dad had taught him, especially for people in uniform. They drove in silence, the rain drumming like a heartbeat overhead. Tessa's jaw was set, her eyes scanning the dark as if expecting an ambush. Ben glanced at her, but didn't speak. He didn't need to. Sometimes silence says more than words ever could. The cabin sat at the edge of the woods, its cedar shingles damp and glistening. It looked like something out of an old storybook, worn, warm, and waiting. Ben parked, killed the engine, and led the way inside. "It's not much," he said, unlocking the door. "But it's dry, and the roof holds." Inside, the air smelled of pine, wood smoke, and something faintly sweet, maybe vanilla, maybe the past. A stove crackled in the corner. Wyatt kicked off his boots and disappeared into his room like it was just another ordinary night. Tessa stood in the doorway, dripping. Unsure. Ben handed her a towel. "Bathroom's down the hall. There's clean clothes in the basket. Might be big, but they're clean." She hesitated again. That same flicker, like stepping into someone else's life, was harder than being alone. But 10 minutes later, she returned wrapped in one of Ben's flannel shirts and baggy sweatpants. Her hair, still damp, was tied back. She looked different. Softer, younger, but her eyes remained old, haunted, like pages torn from a diary no one dared read. Ben handed her a mug. "Coffee." She accepted it. Said nothing. They sat in silence for a while. The clock ticked. The fire popped. Finally she spoke. "Thank you." "For the coffee?" Ben asked, raising an eyebrow. "For stopping." He shrugged. Didn't feel like a choice. That's what makes it matter. Outside, the storm howled. Inside, something gentle began. No promises, no pretense. Just the warmth of being seen, of being safe, of staying. And for Tessa Rohr, that kind of warmth had become a rare and forgotten thing. She hadn't planned to stop. Hadn't planned for anything, really. A borrowed car with a broken GPS. A map that had been folded and refolded until its edges frayed like nerves. She was supposed to head north, straight to Olympia, to Jared's grave. Say goodbye. Keep moving. No attachments. No softness. No detours. But the storm changed that. And so did Ben. Now she sat curled on a worn leather couch, wrapped in a blanket that smelled like detergent and cedar. The fire glowed beside her. Across the room, Ben moved in the kitchen, humming a tune low and slow, like someone who knew sorrow and still chose to sing anyway. "You hungry?" he asked. Tessa thought about lying, but honesty slipped through. A little. "Grilled cheese okay?" Wyatt's favorite. Almost on cue, the boy reappeared, barefoot and curious. "Did you really sleep in the desert?" he asked. "Yeah, a few times." "Did you carry a gun?" "Sometimes." "Cool." Ben shot him a look. "Manners." Wyatt raised his hands, grinning. "Just asking." Tessa laughed, surprised by the sound. It felt foreign on her tongue, like something sacred returning after being gone too long. Dinner was simple, grilled cheese and tomato soup, but it tasted like comfort. Wyatt talked the whole time, asking questions only kids can ask without apology. Had she jumped from planes? Seen wild animals? Knew how to fight? Tessa answered what she could, dodged what she couldn't. Ben watched her quietly, not intruding, just listening. And when their eyes met, it wasn't awkward. It was understanding, unspoken, whole. Afterward, Wyatt headed to his room. Homework, he claimed. Tessa helped clear dishes, but Ben waved her off. "You've done enough," he said. She wandered to the window instead. Rain now just a whisper against the glass. The trees stood solemn and still, like they were watching. "It's quiet here," she murmured. "Too quiet." "No, just different." "City girl. Military. Bases. D.C. for a while." Ben nodded. "That explains the posture." She smirked. "Old habits." A pause. Then, finally, logistics officer. 9 years. 2 tours. Got out 3 weeks ago. He nodded again. Gently. I lost someone. Overseas. That's where I was headed to his grave. Ben's voice came soft. I'm sorry. So am I. She crossed her arms, suddenly cold. I keep thinking if I stand where they buried him, something might make sense again. Ben didn't offer cliches. Didn't reach for words he didn't believe. Sometimes, he said, you don't find answers at graves. Just silence. She looked at him. Really looked. You've lost someone too. My wife. Cancer. 4 years ago. Said like a man who carried grief like a second skin. Familiar. Endured. I'm sorry, she whispered. Me too. The storm eased. The cabin softened into shadow and flicker. Ben gestured to the couch. You're welcome to stay. That car of yours probably needs more than duct tape. Tessa didn't argue. Didn't want to. She just wanted one night without the ache of running. Thanks, she said, barely audible. That night, she lay in the quiet, the creak of wood like lullabies. Somewhere down the hall, Wyatt murmured a bedtime story to himself. She stared at the ceiling. Her fingers reached into her duffel. The letter was still there, unopened. Jared's handwriting on the envelope. A message she hadn't dared read. She tucked it under her pillow, closed her eyes, and, for the first time in a long while, dreamed of something that didn't end in goodbye. She eased the letter back into her duffel bag with a quiet reverence, handling it like it was something sacred or volatile, something that could detonate if treated with anything less than care. From the kitchen came the gentle clink of dishes and the low hiss of bacon sizzling in a pan, breaking the stillness like sunlight through fog. Drawn by the scent and sound, Tessa padded softly across the wooden floor, barefoot and cautious, as though she were moving through someone else's dream. Ben stood at the stove, dressed in a faded gray t-shirt and flannel pajama pants, his hair still damp from a morning shower. It was swept back loosely from his face, revealing a calm expression, one that didn't seem accidental, but earned, the kind of calm that only comes after surviving something. You're up early, he said, not turning around. Smelled the coffee, Tessa replied, her arms wrapped tightly around herself like armor. There's a clean mug in the left cabinet, he offered. She found it, poured herself a cup, and leaned against the counter, watching him. The domesticity of the scene felt almost surreal. I can't remember the last time I woke up to someone cooking breakfast who wasn't wearing combat boots. Ben chuckled. You're lucky Wyatt doesn't let me near the pancakes anymore. Says I flipped them too soon. As if summoned by his name, Wyatt shuffled into the kitchen, clad in mismatched socks and a hoodie that swallowed his small frame. He grunted his way to the table, collapsing into a chair with the drama of a child for whom waking up was a cruel injustice. Ben slid a plate in front of him. Fuel up, soldier. Wyatt lifted his head, cracked a sleepy grin at Tessa. You staying for breakfast? She hesitated. I should be gone by now, she reminded herself. Just one night, that was the deal. But something about the warmth of the kitchen, the quiet presence of Ben, the crackle of bacon in the pan, made it hard to leave. I guess I could stay long enough to eat, she said softly. Wyatt gave her a thumbs up before burying his face in the plate. They ate mostly in silence, save for the occasional clink of fork or slurp of orange juice. Tessa noticed everything. The fraying edges of the tablecloth, the way Wyatt hummed quietly as he chewed, the calendar on the fridge, dotted with hand-drawn stars marking who knew what milestones. It was a home, imperfect, unpolished, but real. After breakfast, Ben started packing Wyatt's school lunch. Tessa, moved by instinct more than thought, reached for the spare sandwich waiting on the counter. PB&J, she asked. Classic, Ben said, nodding. She wrapped it with methodical care, folding the wax paper as if it were a letter. You have kids in your family? He asked gently. No, she replied. I used to make sandwiches like this for someone. The silence that followed was delicate, like frost on a window pane. She didn't offer more, and Ben didn't press. Wyatt slipped on his backpack and boots. As they walked to the truck, Ben glanced toward her. Want a ride to town? Again, she hesitated, then nodded. Yeah, that'd be great. They dropped Wyatt at a small brick schoolhouse, low-slung and square, its walls painted with bright murals and a flag snapping gently in the breeze. As he reached the entrance, Wyatt turned and waved. Tessa found herself waving back. They drove in silence for a while, until Ben asked, "You got plans today?" "I was gonna get the car towed. Figure out the next leg." He nodded, eyes on the road. "You're not in a hurry." It wasn't a question, just truth, placed quietly between them. "No," she admitted, "but I feel like I should be." "Why?" She looked out the window. Pine trees blurred by like silent sentinels. "Because if I stay still too long, I start to feel unfinished." Ben nodded slowly. Sometimes unfinished is exactly where healing begins. They said nothing more, but the silence that followed was not uncomfortable. It was shared. Back at the cabin, Tessa stepped out into morning light. For the first time in days, the sky was clear. The world smelled like wet pine and possibility. She wandered around to the backyard, where an old wooden swing hung from a low branch. It creaked gently as she settled into it, letting herself sway. Before her lay hills rolling into misty valleys, a horizon so vast it seemed untouched by grief or war. Ben appeared with 2 steaming mugs. "Second cup's always better outside," he said, handing her one. She took it, grateful, warming her fingers on the ceramic. They didn't speak for a long time. Then Tessa's voice broke the stillness. "He was 29, she said. "Jared. We served together for 3 years. I was with him the day before he left." Ben nodded, his expression gentle. "I keep telling myself I'll visit his grave, that maybe if I stood there, I'd feel something that made sense. But every time I try, it just feels further away." Ben looked out toward the trees. "Maybe the answers don't live there. Maybe they find us when we stop running." Tessa turned her head. "Is that what happened to you?" He gave a faint smile. "Not yet, but maybe you showing up is step one." She didn't know what to say, so she said nothing. A cardinal landed on the porch railing, flame red against the soft brown wood. She stared at it for a long time. "I might stay one more night," she whispered. Ben didn't smile, didn't move, but something in his body softened, like exhaling. "No pressure," he said, "but if you're still around by dinner, there'll be lasagna." She laughed. "You cook a lot for someone who lives alone." "I cook in case someone stops by." This time, her smile was real. Small, but real. And for the first time and longer than she could remember, Tessa didn't feel like a ghost passing through. She felt kept. The lasagna was divine. Tessa hadn't expected it to be. But Ben, she was learning, was full of quiet surprises. The sauce was rich, the crust golden and crisp. It wasn't just food. It was comfort, warmth, memory. She hadn't tasted anything like it in months. And the taste didn't just linger on her tongue. It lingered in her chest. Wyatt devoured his helping with the urgency of a boy on a mission. Ben ate slowly, with glances toward Tessa, as if silently asking, "Are you staying? Are you okay?" She didn't have the answer. Not yet. After dinner, Wyatt begged for a movie. Ben relented, with conditions. 1 hour. Then book. Then bed. The boy scampered off, leaving the adults behind in the soft clinking of dishes and water. At the sink, Tessa rolled up her sleeves, hands submerged in warm suds. Ben stood beside her, drying each plate with unhurried ease. "You always eat like that?" she asked. "Like what?" "Like the food might disappear." He gave a soft laugh. "Old habit. After Megan passed, eating gave the day shape. Something to do between getting out of bed and going back to it." Tessa paused. "I know that feeling," she said, barely above a whisper. "Tell me about him." Ben asked. She didn't answer right away. Not because she didn't want to, but because her throat tightened like a fist. "Jared wasn't perfect," she began. "Told terrible jokes. Hated broccoli. Snored like a freight train. But he made me feel like I was more than a soldier. Like I was me. A woman. A person." Ben said nothing. Just dried a fork with quiet attention. "We made plans," she continued. "A cabin in Vermont. maybe kids, a dog, a life built on more than just uniforms and orders. She turned off the tap, dried her hands. One day, he volunteered for a patrol, said I needed rest. 12 hours later, they handed me his tags in a plastic bag. The room felt smaller, tighter. I got his last letter 3 days later, but I've never opened it. Ben didn't speak, didn't offer a platitude. He just looked at her with steady, unwavering kindness. You're allowed to break here. His silence seemed to say, I'll hold the pieces. Tessa looked away, bit the inside of her cheek. I thought if I just kept moving, the grief wouldn't catch me, she whispered. But it does. It always does. Ben set down the towel, leaned beside her. What if healing isn't about running from it? What if it's about letting the pain sit beside you, without letting it crush you? She stared at him. Did you come up with that? Or read off a coffee mug? He laughed, a low, warm sound. Years of grief, and a lot of coffee. She smiled, and something inside her eased. That night, she stood on the porch wrapped in a blanket, watching the stars blink awake. The air was pine-sweet, thick with the stillness only found in places far from war, far from memory. Ben stepped out, 2 mugs in hand. Refill, he said simply. They stood side by side, not touching, not speaking, just breathing. You know what's funny? She said eventually. I never wanted to be saved. I just wanted to be seen. Ben nodded, slow and thoughtful. And now, she turned to him, her voice softer than breath. I think I want to be still, just for a little while. He didn't answer, but his posture shifted, like something inside him exhaled. From inside, Wyatt called, Good night. Night, buddy, Ben called back. Tessa added, Sleep tight. A pause, then the boy's voice again. You too, Miss Tessa. Something in her heart cracked open. That night, sleep came slow. Jared's letter lay beneath her pillow. Her fingers grazed it, still unread, still heavy, but the hollow ache in her chest was changing. It echoed now, not just with sorrow, but with laughter, with kindness, with the soft warmth of a second chance. Maybe grief didn't go away. Maybe it made space. And maybe this little cabin in Maple Hollow wasn't a detour. Maybe it was the beginning. Rain woke her the next morning, gentle, rhythmic, like the earth itself was breathing deeper. Not a storm, just a lullaby from the sky. Tessa sat up slowly. The fire was out, but someone, Ben surely, had tucked an extra quilt over her. The scent of pine and coffee grounded her. In the kitchen, a note waited. Took Wyatt to town. Be back by lunch. If you're bored, the shed key's by the back door. B. The word shed tugged at her curiosity like an old thread. She found the key, stepped outside. The shed stood just beyond the tree lane, worn and weathered, shrouded in ivy and memory. She opened the door to the scent of cedar and thyme. Inside was one thing, covered in canvas. She peeled it back. A piano. Old, upright, battered, beautiful. She sat, let her fingers drift, and then she played. Not a song, a feeling, a breath. Notes rose like smoke, hesitant, then confident. Something inside her stirred, music she hadn't touched since before. Ben heard it from the driveway. Wyatt, halfway out of the truck, paused. Dad, Ben lifted a hand. Go on inside, buddy. He stood at the shed door and listened. It wasn't the melody he recognized, but the truth of it. The ache, the grace, the beginning. They used to play on mornings, so still, you could almost hear the world exhale. Not because the music was grand or perfect, but because in that quiet, the melodies found space to breathe. And in that space, so did the pain. Tessa's fingers hovered delicately over the piano keys, her eyes closed, shoulders at ease. Her face bathed in a kind of fragile serenity. The notes spilled out slowly, like rain on glass, soft, deliberate, and aching. Ben watched from the doorway, the sound pulling at something dormant inside him. He knocked gently, not wanting to shatter the fragile moment. Tessa startled, turning quickly. I didn't mean to, she began, her voice apologetic. But Ben stepped in, shaking his head. Don't apologize. He glanced at the piano. I didn't even know it still worked. "You don't play?" she asked. "I used to," he replied. Megan played more. After she passed, I just closed the door. Tessa looked back at the instrument, her expression tender. "It's beautiful." Ben's voice was quieter now, nearly lost in the air. She was... A pause. Then, almost as an afterthought, he added, "The piano, too." Silence stretched between them, not empty, but weighty. A shared understanding neither had asked for, yet both recognized. "I haven't played since college," Tessa admitted. "Before the army. Jared taught me a few songs, but I stopped when he—" Her voice cracked, trailing off. Ben gave a soft nod. No need to finish the sentence. Some truths don't require words. "You and Megan," she asked carefully, "were you together long?" "High school sweethearts," he said, the corners of his mouth lifting with a memory's ghost. "Married at 23. Diagnosed at 34. Gone by 36. Tessa looked down, the weight of it pressing into her. "I'm sorry." Ben offered a small, knowing smile. "People say that a lot, but I think what they really mean is, I don't know what to say. And it's okay. I didn't either." She folded her hands in her lap, quietly. "Do you still miss her?" "Every day," he answered without hesitation. "But not the way I used to. Not with that sharp, breath-stealing ache. Now it's more like remembering a favorite song. It still hurts, but it reminds me that I had something worth grieving." Tessa's throat tightened. "I've been afraid to remember," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Afraid that if I start, I won't be able to stop." Ben's eyes held a gentle understanding. That's the thing about memory. It doesn't ask for permission. It just shows up. She reached into her pocket and drew out a letter, unopened, the paper worn at the edges, the handwriting unmistakably Jared's. "I still haven't read it," she murmured. "I brought it here to read it as grave, but I couldn't. I'm scared." Ben stepped forward, his voice a hush. "Scared of what?" "That it will end things," she whispered. "That once I read it, he'll really be gone." "Or maybe," Ben said gently, "it's the opposite. Maybe what he wrote will bring a part of him back." Her hands trembled. She stared at the envelope, her breath shaky. "I'm not ready." "That's okay," Ben said softly. "No one's counting." And in that moment, standing beside someone who wasn't trying to fix her, wasn't demanding she move on or get better, Tessa felt something inside her begin to loosen, a knot so tightly bound around her grief. She hadn't realized it was strangling her. She tucked the letter back into her pocket and turned toward the piano. "Will you play something?" she asked. Ben smiled sheepish. "It's been years." "Then it's about time." He sat beside her, cracked his knuckles, and after a long exhale, pressed the first key. The sound stumbled at first, awkward and unsure, but slowly something clicked. Chords emerged, blending, unfolding, mending. Side by side they played, not for an audience, not for perfection, but to remember. To remember that even hands worn by grief could still create something beautiful. Outside the rain fell. Quiet, steady, like forgiveness. It was a Tuesday, gray, hushed, cloaked in fog. No thunder, no dramatic skies. Just the soft whisper of morning mist curling through the trees. Tessa hadn't slept. Dreams had come in flickers, Jared's laugh, the sudden silence, the weight of things unsaid. She stood barefoot on the porch, a cup of coffee warming her hands, the letter heavy in her pocket as it had been for weeks. But today something felt different. Inside, Ben stirred early too. He stepped out, his own mug in hand. "You're up," he said softly. "I couldn't sleep," she replied. They stood in quiet companionship, sipping, breathing. Then, after a beat, Tessa said, "I think I'm ready." Ben didn't ask what she meant. He just nodded and stepped back inside. She went to the shed, the makeshift music room, and sat before the piano. The letter sat beside her, worn, the paper thin where her thumb had rubbed over it countless times. She stared at her name. Jared had underlined it once. Just once. Tessa. Her breath caught. And then, slowly, she slid her finger beneath the flap. The paper tore like a whisper. She unfolded the letter like it was something sacred, something holy. And when she saw the first line, Jared's voice came back, not in sound, but in memory. Tess, if you're reading this, it means the thing I was afraid of happened. And I'm sorry. God, I'm sorry. Not for what I did. You know I volunteered. You know I've never been good at sitting still when someone else could be in danger. But I'm sorry for what this will do to you. Tears threatened. Her hands trembled. But she read on, devouring every line. I didn't leave because I didn't love you. I left because I did. Because I believe in a world where your smile still exists. You changed me, Tess. You made me believe in more than uniforms and duty. You made me believe in home. Please, don't let grief be the last thing I gave you. Live, laugh, be loved, build that cabin, kiss someone in the rain, teach a kid to throw a baseball. You're still here. That means there's more ahead for you. And if you ever hear someone play the piano, really play, think of me. I'll be there. Always. With everything I ever had. Jared. She read it again. And again. Until the words weren't just on the paper. They were inside her. Rooted deep. The tears finally came. Not loud, not wild. Just slow. Soft. Like spring rain. A release long overdue. Grief didn't vanish. But it changed. Jared hadn't written to say goodbye. He had written to send her forward. Later, when she returned to the cabin, her steps were steady, her shoulders lighter, her eyes rimmed in salt, but clear. Ben looked up. He told me to live, she said quietly. Ben rose from a couch. Then I hope you'll listen to him. She smiled, small but real. I think I finally can. Just then a knock. Ben looked puzzled. Wyatt dashed to the door and flung it open. Miss Tessa, you got mail. She took the envelope, noting the army seal in the corner. Inside a certificate, a formal discharge, and a note. They're offering me a civilian role, she said aloud. Logistics training coordinator. Part-time. Working with veterans. Ben raised an eyebrow. Where? Here. This county. Wyatt grinned from the kitchen. That means you'd stay. Tessa glanced at him, then at Ben. I'm not sure yet. Ben didn't push. I think it'd be good. For them. For you. For you, she asked. He shrugged. Maybe. That night, she played the piano again. This time, when Ben joined her, she didn't stop. She wasn't surviving anymore. She was beginning. The evening wrapped itself in gold. Sunlight filtered through the trees like a blessing. Inside, Wyatt hummed, stacking Legos. Ben cooked, sleeves rolled, moving like someone who'd learned peace the hard way. Tessa sat on the porch, knees drawn up, watching the light fade. For days since the letter. For days of possibility. She hadn't made a decision about the job. But she knew now, staying might be the bravest choice of all. Not because it was safe, but because it meant building again. And then a knock. Sharp. Purposeful. Everything stopped. Ben answered. A woman stood tall on the porch, poised, pressed, official. Mr. Callahan? She asked. Yes. I'm Marion Doyle. Child and Family Services. I'm here regarding Wyatt. The air shifted. What about him? Ben's voice was careful. A petition has been filed. By your wife's parents. Tessa stepped instinctively beside Wyatt. They're requesting a formal review of his custody. Ben's jaw clenched. They haven't spoken to us in years. I understand, Marion said. But there are allegations. Emotional neglect, lack of academic support, social isolation. Tessa almost laughed. Absurd. Wyatt was one of the most emotionally aware kids she'd ever known. Ben's tone stayed calm. They were against homeschooling. Said it'd make him weird. Megan and I agreed to teach him ourselves. He's thriving. I'm not here to make assumptions, Marion replied. Only to observe. Ben hesitated. Then, with a nod, stepped aside. You're welcome to come in. And just like that, the next chapter began. One filled with uncertainty, but no longer defined by fear. Because for the first time, grief wasn't the end of the story. It was only the middle. When Ben Callahan stood motionless by the door, his silence spoke more than words ever could. Marian, the social worker, had just finished scribbling her last notes and rose with the kind of calm detachment that made Ben feel like the air had been sucked out of the room. "I'll submit my preliminary report within the week," she said, her tone professional but not unkind. "In the meantime, it would be wise to consult a family attorney. If this escalates into a custody hearing, you'll want someone in your corner." Ben nodded numbly, walking her to the door. As she stepped outside, Marian turned, her expression softening slightly. "This isn't uncommon, Mr. Callahan. Grandparents often feel helpless after a loss. It doesn't necessarily mean something's wrong, but you should be ready." And just like that, she was gone. The door clicked shut with a finality that reverberated through Ben's chest like an echo in an empty hall. He didn't speak. He simply stared at the wood grain as if he could somehow peer through it and into the future. Tessa's voice broke the silence, low and worried. "They want to take him from you." Still, Ben said nothing. But then, hollow and cracked like a man finally surrendering to the weight he'd been carrying for far too long, he spoke. "Megan's parents, they never forgave me. They said I robbed her of a chance, that I took her off the chemo too early. But they didn't hear her when she said she was tired, when she begged me for peace." Tessa's heart clenched. "You honored her wishes, Ben." He gave a bitter laugh. "They didn't care about her wishes. They only cared about control. And after she died, they never even met Wyatt. Not once." From the table, a small voice broke through the heavy moment. "Am I in trouble?" Ben crossed the room, dropping to his knees beside his son. "No, buddy. You're not in trouble. And no one is taking you away. But what if they try?" Wyatt's eyes, wide and scared, searched his father's face. Ben exhaled, a tremor running through him. Then, for the first time since Tessa had met him, something in his armor cracked. "They can try," he whispered, his voice raw with love and rage. "But they'll have to go through me first." Tessa moved without thinking, her hand finding his shoulder. He didn't flinch. "They're not going to win," she said with quiet conviction. "Not if I can help it." Ben looked at her, truly looked, and in that still moment, something unspoken passed between them. It was stronger than fear, deeper than grief. It was trust. That knock on the door hadn't just been a bureaucratic visit. It had reached back into Ben's past, ripped open old scars, guilt, loss, the fragile piece he'd pieced together day by day. But it had done something else, too. It had drawn Tessa closer. That evening, after Wyatt had gone to bed, Tessa found Ben in the shed, standing before a piano like it was a relic of another life. He didn't play. He didn't even touch the keys. Just stared. "They'll push," he said quietly. "Harder than I expect. They always had money. And lawyers." She stepped beside him, close but careful. "You're not alone this time." Ben turned to her, voice barely above a breath. "Do you think I'm a good father?" There was no hesitation. "I think you're the best kind." The moonlight traced the edge of his jaw, catching in eyes that shimmered with unshed pain. Neither moved, but something had already shifted between them. Not just a resolve to fight for family, but the tender, tentative roots of something else. Something like love. The scent of rosemary and roasted garlic drifted through the cabin like a quiet promise of better days. Tessa had cooked, not out of obligation, but out of a deep need to do something healing, something warm, something normal. She moved through the kitchen with the ease of someone who had always belonged there. Her hands worked with purpose, browning butter, basting chicken, setting intention into every motion. Ben leaned silently in the doorway, arms folded, not daring to interfere, just watching, as if the space had been waiting for her all along. "Wyatt," she called, wiping her hands. "Set the table." He bounded in from the hallway, cheeks still pink from playing outside. "Are we having guests?" "No," she said, smiling. "We're just going to make tonight feel special." "Special sounds good." He grinned, rushing to get the silverware. Ben chuckled. He's not used to that word going with dinner. Tessa winked. "Then we better change that." They ate together, slowly, meaningfully. The kind of meal that nourished more than just the body. The kind that made people feel safe. Should we say grace? Wyatt asked as they sat. Ben blinked. We haven't done that in a while. You go ahead, Tessa said gently. Wyatt bowed his head and whispered a few words they couldn't quite hear. When he looked up, his face was pink. I just said thanks. For you guys. For dinner. Ben reached over and ruffled his hair. That's a pretty solid prayer. They talked and laughed. The kind of laughter that lingers in the walls long after bedtime. Stories about Lego spaceships and drunken raccoons. About ice cream made from mashed potatoes. Laughter that felt like healing. When dinner was done, Tessa stood to clear the plates. Ben stopped her with a look. You cooked, he said. We clean. She hesitated, then let herself sit back down. She watched them, the quiet rhythm between father and son. Ben rinsing, Wyatt drying, like a song they both knew by heart. It was a glimpse into the life they'd made. Simple, real, full of love. And she was a part of it now. Later, with mugs of tea warming their hands, they sat in the quiet glow of the fire. Not speaking, just being. Tessa finally broke the silence. About the job. Ben didn't look up, but Wyatt did. I haven't said yes yet, she continued. I've been thinking, not just about the job, but what comes with it. About what staying here would really mean. Ben looked up slowly. I'm starting to think maybe home isn't something you build from the ground up. Maybe sometimes it's something that's already waiting for you. You just have to say yes to it. Wyatt blinked. Does that mean you'll stay? I'm still deciding, she said. But if I did, would that be okay? Wyatt nodded solemnly. Only if you keep making food like tonight. They all laughed. But Ben's laugh, though quiet, carried weight. It carried hope. The next morning arrived cloaked in eerie stillness. No rain, no wind, just a thick, breathless quiet. Ben stood on the porch, coffee in hand, eyes fixed on the trees like they held the answer. He hadn't slept. Not really. Marion's words had echoed all night. Custody hearing, legal counsel, emotional well-being. He tried not to imagine Wyatt in court, not to see him in a suit too big, answering questions from strangers who didn't know bedtime songs or Lego defenses made from duct tape. You okay? Tessa's voice came soft behind him. He didn't turn. Define okay. She stepped beside him, wrapped in a sweater, her hair damp from a quick shower. I define it as not spiraling before breakfast. Ben gave a weak smile. I keep wondering if I did something wrong. You didn't. Then why doesn't it feel like enough? Tessa set her coffee down and stood silently beside him. Because you've been carrying this alone for too long, she said. You forgot how heavy it is. Maybe it's time to let someone else carry part of it. Before he could answer, the sound of tires on gravel made them both freeze. A sleek silver SUV appeared at the edge of the driveway. Ben's grip on his cup tightened. Ted Lockhart, he muttered. Tessa's spine straightened. Wyatt, curious, stepped onto the porch. Wyatt, a cold voice called. It's me. The boy shrank back instinctively. Ben stepped between them. What do you want, Ted? I wanted to see my grandson. I've been denied that for too long. You had for years. I was grieving. Grieving doesn't make you disappear, Ben snapped. And it doesn't give you the right to destroy the only home this boy knows. Tessa moved forward. Maybe this isn't the time. Ted's eyes flicked over her. And you are someone who cares. This doesn't have to get ugly. Supervised visitation. Structured transition. There's no transition, Ben said, voice hard. He's my son. Ted's expression darkened. That wasn't abandonment. It was protection. From what? Love, Ben snarled. Tessa touched Ben's arm. Go inside. I'll handle this. Ben hesitated, then nodded, guiding Wyatt into the cabin. Tessa stepped forward. You have every right to miss your daughter, she said. But this will only add to the damage. That boy lost one parent. Don't make him lose another. Ted looked at her long, then handed her a card. My lawyer's info. And just like that, he left. Inside, Wyatt curled into Ben's side at the table. Tessa entered quietly. They're not backing down, she said. Ben nodded once, Then we stop hoping they'll go away. He looked at her. Not just the woman before him, but the warrior, the survivor, the heart. What do we do? He asked. She met his gaze. We fight. Together. Ben reached out, his palm open on the table. Tessa placed hers on top of it. Wyatt, silently watching, reached up and added his own. 3 hands, one bond. Not born of blood, but of choice, of love. It was fragile, but it was family. And in its own imperfect way, it was real. The court date loomed just 2 weeks from Friday. That morning, Ben had spent hours tethered to the phone, his voice hushed but urgent, consulting a local family attorney. Meanwhile, little Wyatt sat curled in the corner with a crayon-streaked notepad, sketching spaceships protected by shields made of hearts. Tessa watched him from across the room, her thoughts swirling like a gathering storm. The house, once a place of quiet, healing rhythm, now felt tense, like the walls themselves had inhaled the pressure of the unknown and were creaking beneath its weight. When Ben finally hung up, the heaviness in his shoulders betrayed more than exhaustion. It was a man bearing the weight of love, fear, and the unbearable thought of losing the boy who had anchored him to life. He turned to her slowly. "They need character statements," he said. "Letters proving stability from the school board, neighbors, anyone who can speak to Wyatt's well-being." "You'll have them," she answered, almost reflexively. "I know," he murmured, lowering himself onto a chair like the very act of sitting took effort. "Part of me wants to scream. The other part wants to take Wyatt and vanish into the mountains." Tessa didn't flinch. "You won't." Ben looked up. "How do you know?" "Because you stayed." A silence followed, softer this time. Not empty, but full, like the stillness after a song that leaves the room too sacred to disturb. Tessa inhaled deeply. "I got a call this morning," she said. Ben arched a brow. "From who?" "The VA office. They're offering me the role, logistics coordinator. Full-time. Permanent. Not part-time like before." He didn't react at first, his face unreadable. "That's what you wanted," he said quietly. She nodded. "It's meaningful work. Helping veterans. Building training programs." She hesitated, then let the truth land between them. "But it's in Salem." Ben leaned back. "That's 3 hours away." "I know." His jaw clenched as he looked out the window. Tessa approached the moment gently. "I haven't accepted it," she said. He turned toward her, his gaze holding back too many emotions. "Because of us. Because of you," she whispered. "Because of Wyatt. Because this place gave me something I didn't know I needed." Ben stood and walked slowly to the window. "I don't want to hold you back, Tessa." "You're not." Her voice was steady. "You have a whole life waiting. A clean life. With a paycheck. With health care. With people who don't show up at your door, threatening custody battles." She walked toward him, every step deliberate. "But I don't want clean. I want honest. I want real. I want the kind of life that's messy and raw, where we burn the toast and still laugh over it at the dinner table." He turned. "If you think I'm choosing between helping veterans and loving you," she said softly, "then you've never understood who I am." The air between them changed. Not heavy, but charged. Tessa hadn't said those words before, not aloud. "Loving you." Ben's eyes darkened, not with sorrow, but something deeper, like a man who had been drowning in silence and was finally remembering how to breathe. "Tessa," he said quietly, "there's something I've never told you." She waited. It wasn't just grief after Megan died. I didn't just get tired, I broke. I went dark. There were days I left Wyatt with the neighbors and just drove. I couldn't look at him without seeing her. Couldn't sleep without hearing her cough. Tessa reached for his hand. He let her take it. "I almost gave him away," he confessed. Her eyes widened. "After the funeral, her parents offered to take him, just until I sorted myself out. And for 2 days, I considered it. I had the papers in my hands." "But you didn't," she said. "No, because one night, after a long drive, I sat in the truck for an hour. When I finally walked in, Wyatt was on the floor, hugging Megan's old sweater like a security blanket. He looked up and said, "You came back." Ben's voice cracked. That's when I knew. I wasn't broken. I was just scared. And he was waiting for me to show up. Tessa didn't speak. She just held his hand tighter. "I'm still scared," he whispered. "So am I," she said. "But now, we don't have to be scared alone." His gaze met hers, glassy and full. "I don't want you to leave." She smiled. "I won't. I'll take the job, but I'll make it work. 2 days remote, 3 in Salem. We'll find a rhythm. People do it every day, when they have something worth staying close to." "And what do you have?" he asked. "You and Wyatt," she replied without hesitation. "That's home." He pulled her into his arms, not in passion, but in profound relief, in that aching, sacred comfort that comes when someone finally says the words your soul had been starved of for years. They stood there, embraced by silence, lit by morning light, the beginning of something so fragile. Neither of them dared name it just yet. That evening, Tessa found Wyatt on the porch, sketching in his notebook. "What are you drawing?" she asked, kneeling beside him. He flipped a page proudly. It was a picture of a little house nestled among trees. In front stood 3 figures, a tall man, a woman with long hair, and a small child with a red cape. "That's us," he said, beaming. "But I gave myself a cape." She tousled his hair. "Why the cape?" He shrugged. "Everyone needs something to help them fly." Tessa blinked, the sting behind her eyes catching her off guard. "You're not wrong," she whispered, as the sun dipped behind the hills, spilling gold and violet across the sky. She leaned back on the step beside him. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like a visitor, or a soldier, or someone forgotten by time. She felt like someone who had come home. No fanfare, no parades, just the creak of the porch under 3 sets of feet, and the hush of wind whispering through the trees, like Maple Hollow itself had exhaled. Autumn had woven itself into the town, the trees wearing their finest shades of burnt orange and amber, the mornings beginning with the hush of frost on window panes. Tessa pinned up a flyer at the community center bulletin board, Veteran Transition Program. Her name was listed at the bottom. So was Ben's, program director, volunteer instructor. It still made her smile every time she saw it. Across the lot, Ben was helping Wyatt out of the truck. The boy wore a paper crown and waved a poster proudly that read in uneven letters, "My dad is my hero." His school had celebrated Family Heroes Week. Wyatt hadn't even blinked before choosing his. Ben had blushed. Tessa had cried. As they approached, Wyatt breathlessly declared, "I told Mrs. Keene you were a soldier and that you fix people." She asked if that meant you were a doctor. He added, "I said no. She's better." Tessa crouched, blinking rapidly. "That might be the nicest thing anyone's ever said to me," she whispered. "He also told them I cry when chopping onions," Ben added with a grin, "but forgot to mention I make the best chili in town." "Too much garlic," Tessa smirked. They stepped inside, into the warmth of cider, the aroma of baked goods, and the laughter of families gathering to celebrate welcome home, a night for those who served. Tessa took the microphone. Her voice trembled at first. "I'm not big on speeches," she began, "but thank you. Thank you for believing in second chances, for proving that home isn't something you return to. It's something you build forward." Applause rippled across the room. Ben stood in the crowd, watching her with something reverent in his eyes. "You still nervous in front of people?" he asked afterward. "Only when the man I love is watching," she said. Ben blinked, stunned. She hadn't taken it back. He reached for her hand. "I've waited a long time to hear that," he said. "I know," she whispered. And then, as the world softened around them, they kissed. Not dramatic, not rushed, but true. The kind that made someone in the room clap, and made Wyatt giggle over a plate of cookies. Later that night, the truck hummed through the quiet as they drove home. Wyatt had fallen asleep, drooling slightly on his hero poster. Tessa carried him inside, while Ben disappeared into the shed. She found him there, seated at the old piano. The lid was open, keys exposed. He wasn't playing, just sitting. "I remember the first night I saw this," she said gently. "It was raining. You told me you didn't play anymore." I didn't, he murmured. Not until you. She smiled. Play something. He hesitated, then slowly, tenderly began. The notes were unpolished, but honest, fragile and beautiful and broken in all the best ways. Tessa closed her eyes and let the melody wash over her. This wasn't music. It was memory. It was forgiveness. It was peace. When the final note faded, she whispered, "You know what I think? I think this is what Jared meant." Ben looked at her. "What do you mean?" She pulled a weathered letter from her pocket, read the line aloud. "Kissed someone under a thunderstorm." "We didn't have a thunderstorm," she said, "but we had the rain, the knock at the door, and we had this." Ben nodded, his voice low. "You're not running anymore." "No," she said. "I'm choosing. And I choose this. I choose us." He took her hand again. No words. Just warmth. Belonging. Outside, the wind stirred the trees. The old porch creaked beneath their home. And inside that small cabin at the edge of Maple Hollow, 3 hearts finally beat in harmony. Not with the roar of war, nor the silence of grief, but with something deeper, quieter, stronger. The sound of coming home.